Hello Terraria enthusiasts, my name is James and today I'm going to be talking about something that doesn't get talked about that often. Nerfed weapons and items and armor. So like I said recently, Terraria has been in working development since 2011 and since then a handful of items and weapons have been added and then later tweaked and improved. Now this often takes place after an update has been released and fan input has been heard. Now, sometimes an improvement can mean nerfing the item so that it fits better in the Terraria universe. This process can often mean damage being removed or changed, and crafting recipes improved, or even shifting the item's purpose. Now in today's list I'm going to be counting down the 5 top nerfed items and weapons that have seen drastic performance drops since they were added. Now be aware, I do not think that any of these weapons and items were nerfed for a bad reason at all, nor does them being nerfed bother me in the slightest. This list is meant to serve as a fun look back, so with that out of the way, let's begin.
5.
Now one of the most recent items to be nerfed was the Stardust Dragon Staff, which was introduced in update 1.3 and then later tweaked in a following update 1.3.0.6, which reduced the damage from 60 to 40, and this created a little bit of discussion on the internet about the item's worth, as the damage had been reduced by 33% since it was first introduced. However, considering it is meant to serve as the final minion staff, as long as the damage is higher than all of the other staffs, I have no reason to complain. However, I can understand how powerful the staff used to be and how this could be really enjoyable to play with, but in terms of damage reductions, this has to be one of the highest damage nerfs in the game's history.
4.
Now the Rod of Discord is a seriously powerful item, allowing the player to teleport anywhere they want to on screen, and if used right could be spammed to teleport the entire map in seconds. Now this makes complete sense why they nerfed this one. I'm actually still surprised they didn't make it even harder to get when I first saw it. So the original Rod of Discord could be used repeatedly with no penalty, but in the update 1.2.0.3 they introduced a new debuff called Chaos State that would damage the player if they repeatedly used it. Now when this nerf came in, it would take 1/6 of the player's health and it would take a 10-second cooldown. However, in recent changes it has been reduced to 1/7 and 6 seconds, so I guess there is some form of compromise.
3.
Now back when this update was coming out, I didn't really look at changelog since I like to be surprised, but this definitely was some surprise to me. Now the first real nerf I can remember was the one to meteorite armor and rocket boots. Now for those who didn't play the very first build of Terraria, rocket boots would allow for infinite flight since they worked completely off your mana and there was no potion sickness back then. And so people would pair rocket boots with the easy to get meteorite armor, which gave mana replacement then, and this was the easiest and cheapest way to fly. However, they decided to give rocket boots the 5-second flight duration they have now and increased takeoff speed to compensate. Now this was a horrible change for me since back then this was the only way you could fly, and so having my flight time reduced from 30 seconds to 5 felt awful, but of course now it doesn't really matter and there are new ways to fly. Meteorite armor was also changed from giving great mana replacement to only making the space gun free to use, which felt like an odd change back then, but it did balance the gap between jungle and meteorite armor. Also for those who didn't know, rocket boots were actually found during a goblin invasion, which I always preferred.
2.
Now console viewers, you don't actually have to pay complete attention to this one since you have the option to turn off the nerf for this one, but PC players, listen up. So I can speak for the majority of motion sickness gamers when I say this nerf was horrific for churning people's stomach, but was completely in need of happening. Now the original gravitation potion allowed the player to flip gravity, which I'm sure you all know, and if used right this would allow for infinite flight, and would also serve as a great way to take down some of the mechanical bosses. But a change to them meant that the world would flip with you, causing some pretty bizarre motion sickness for some. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining or anything, like I said it was definitely needed, but I'd still really love an option to turn it off like in the console versions. This nerf didn't affect their overall use of the item, but it definitely meant some people weren't using this for bosses as often, although it still can be done.
1.
Now, if there was ever an armor that caused controversy, it was this one. So when the Spectre armor was introduced, it would allow players 25% increased magic damage, 17% increased critical, 8% increased movement, plus 80 mana, 17% reduced mana usage, and 10% health per hit. Now that's a serious mouthful and seriously powerful. Now this armour took some very serious nerf hits, and to paraphrase, they're now harder to get with chlorophyte bars required to craft them now. The defense was reduced from 31 to 24 and then back to 30. The lifesteal was improved but damage was reduced by 40%, and then it no longer gives additional mana. Now I hope that made sense and I didn't mess that up, but considering all the changes this armour has gone through, it only makes sense that I get something wrong. Now this caused endless amounts of Reddit threads as people were giving their input on how the armour should work, and let me tell you, some serious moderation work was needed. Now you can't please everyone, but it's entirely safe to say this armour was very overpowered to begin with. So that's about it for today's video. Now if you're not done binge watching Terraria videos yet, why not check out this recent one I did on my top 5 changes to Terraria since it launched back in 2011. If you like this list, you will definitely like that one. Now before you leave, why not click that subscribe button? By clicking that button, you'll be the first to see my latest videos and lists entirely for free on a daily basis. Chippy Gaming is a one-stop place for all things Terraria, and it makes complete sense to stick around. As always, I thank you for your continuous support, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Also, just a little bonus, just if you're still lingering around, I hated the nerf to the Shadow Orb because basically it was a really good light pet and then they made it so dull, nobody ever uses it. Like you get it and you just bin it. But, you know, light nerfs and such.